Good morning, card communities. RJ back with a video on an off day for me, which means something's happening that's a little out of the ordinary. And in this particular case, it is a subscriber video. So a man named Huck out there in the card community from Huck Sports Cards has hit 500 subscribers, and he is doing a 500 subscriber contest. One of the typical contests, I would say. Top 5 players of all time. Who are your top 5 players all time? I will include a link to his 500 subscriber contest video in the description below. So check it out if you want to get involved in all that's great with Mr. Huck's contest. So my top 5 players all time. I will say this. Most of them are pretty understandable, and they're going to make everybody else's top 5 lists. My number 5 is a little different, so allow me to share with you my top 5 players all time. Number 5 for me is Tris Speaker. This is his T206 card. It's actually a reprint. I do not have a Tris Speaker T206 card. Here is a card from Upper Deck, the Sporting News best players of the 20th century. He made number 27 on their list. So a couple cards of Tris Speaker of the Red Sox. Why did I pick Tris Speaker of the Red Sox? Well, give me a second. I'm going to flip the phone around real quick and give you a look at his stats and talk a little bit more about why Tris Speaker belongs on this list. Hang on a second. So Tris Speaker's career stats show a couple things. One is he was the career leader in doubles, still holds that record. This is back in an era when ball fields, in the early days, a lot of them weren't enclosed in the outfield, so the outfield sometimes was open. It was also a lot deeper in some cases because they hadn't put grandstands up in the outfield section yet. So they would make larger outfield areas, and it was easier to run and stretch a single into a double in a lot of those older ballparks. So he still holds the career record for doubles. Interestingly, let's take a look and see who's behind him. So career record for doubles right here. Tris Speaker at 792. Next in line is Pete Rose at 746, so almost 50 ahead of his nearest competitor. There's only 4 people at all with over 700 career doubles, and Albert Pujols is the only player. He's in the top 5 career, so it's quite impressive that Tris Speaker is still holding on to that career record, especially when you consider where people are playing longer times. But also, Tris Speaker is number 5 on career hits. He's one of those players people forget about when you talk about the greatest of all time accumulating base hits. The whole point of the game is to get on base and score. Tris Speaker had 3,514 career hits, but that's a massive amount of hits. People forget about Tris Speaker a lot. The other thing I loved about Tris Speaker is if you consider his offensive prowess, which I will call it that, offensive prowess. He played in the dead ball era, which means he didn't hit a lot of home runs. This was before Babe Ruth started, going crazy on the home runs. When 10 or 12 would lead the league in some cases. But his defense was so incredibly stellar too. And he stole a lot of bases. This was an era when people stole bases, so he stole a lot of bases. But Tris Speaker would play exceptionally shallow. His speed was so great that he would play, just a couple yards off of the second base bag, so that when a lazy fly ball was hit, he'd be able to catch it. And sometimes it wasn't unheard of him for him to position himself so that when a fly ball happened, he would run up and just at the last second pause so that it dropped, so that a player who was on first base would go halfway worrying that he would catch it and might tag him, he might be caught off base on a fly count. Then Tris would just he'd catch it on bounce, and in the dead run to second base and beat the guy and step on second to force the guy at second. He did that many times because of how shallow he played. He was a phenomenal defensive player. He was he was a member of many of the early Red Sox World Series championship teams. Uh, Good friend of Ty Cobb and some other early players. But he's often overlooked, and I believe he warrants number 5 on the list, not only because of the combination of his career number of hits and his what do I want to say, his doubles, but let's see, his career batting average, believe it or not, where is career batting average? Up here. I got a lot of things up here. His career batting average is where is he on this list? He was 9th on career batting average, 344, 348 essentially. Now, interesting batting average, he's listed as 9th. That includes 3 of the Negro League players who have recently been added to the career stats. So, not speaking ill of the decision from Major League Baseball to do that. That's fine by me. Prior to that decision, he would have been listed as number 6 all-time in career batting average. Tris Speaker was a phenomenal all-around player who I believe is a long-forgotten individual and it is warranted that he be on this list of top 5. My number 2 is, give me a second, I'm going to flip the phone back around and show you a couple cards real quick. So, number 4, Ted Williams. This is also his Sporting News All-Century, ranking. He was 8th in their ranking. That's his Upper Deck Century Legends. Here is an insert card from Topps talking about obviously the most famous thing that Ted is known for, which is his 406 average back in 1941. We're going to flip the phone around and take a look at Ted's stats, of course, but I mean, if you're a baseball fan, historian, or lover of the game, you know all about Ted Williams and what a phenomenal hitter is, but I do want to show off a couple things for you, so hang on a second. So the first thing to remember about Ted Williams is that he lost at least 4 prime years, if not 5, depending on how you look at it, to military service in both World War II and the Korean War. So you'll see from 1940, in the years 1943, 44, and 45, he was completely out of the league. And that was right in the middle of when he would have been leading the league in every category. I mean, he was routinely hitting 35 home runs at that time. So he easily lost out on 100 home runs in that era. He's finished with 521. That means he would have been up at like 621, 630, something like that. If you look at the years 1952 to 1953, when he was in Korea, you can say he also lost 3 prime years to 2 prime years during that time frame. Again, assuming he finished with 35 home runs a season, which was not unheard of. It's certainly his average is 37, but I'm only saying 35. That would have given him another 70 home runs, which means he easily would have been in the 700 home run club. The other thing about Ted Williams is I don't know how many hits he would have had. If we assume he had, down here, it's a great little stat on Baseball Reference. It talks about what his average stat was every year. His average of hits was 188 over 19 years. So, dang near 4,000 hits. So he would have been in the high 3,000s hit-wise in a career. So they talk about Ted Williams being the greatest hitter ever. If you look there at all the black and italic stats where he led or tied the league in an offensive category, that is why people talk about Ted Williams being the greatest hitter ever. I don't, I'm sure his defense was okay. Certainly, I would think it was probably more than just average. So he didn't finish top in career hits. But batting average, Ted Williams is tied number 10. And again, there are 3 Negro League players who have been added to the list. He would have been 7 prior to that. Again, not trying to say anything against the decision. It is what it is. He is now tied at number 10. with Billy Hamilton at 345 career batting average. He certainly has, obviously, he has 521 home runs. He had 2 MVPs. He had a Triple Crown season. The man was just a hitting machine. I don't know, like I said, how great of his defense was, but his just as a pure hitter, Ted Williams had no peer. As just a hitter, there is no hitter, just pure taking the bat and doing what you're supposed to do with the bat. Wasn't anybody as good as Ted Williams, period, end of story. So that is number 4 on my top 10 list. Give me a second, we'll talk about number 3. So a lot of people are going to have this man at number 2, but I'm putting him at number 3. Willie Mays. This is his card from that same set. They had him at number 2. Now, this is one of the things Willie is most known for, is the catch from the 1954 World Series. So a couple cards highlighting Willie's career. Why would I put him at number 3? I think it's because the person I have at number 2 is often overlooked as one of the greatest players of all time. Not overlooked as one of the greatest, but he doesn't make a number 1 or a number 2 often enough. We'll get to that in a second. But Willie is 100% number 3 on my book. Let's take a look at his career stats. So interesting about Willie, he did have a lot of league-leading statistics. Okay, he certainly had 660 career home runs, just an amazing number. He had over 3,000 career hits, and over 3,000 career hits and over 500 home runs, which used to be a very exclusive club. For better or worse, it's becoming more regular these days, which I think is a good thing. It shows that people are playing longer, maybe, or just playing better. So that's a good thing about Willie. And clearly Willie was a 30-30 man regularly, 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases. He, I don't want to say he made it a point to steal bases, but his career stolen bases was 338 career, is that right? No, there it is, I'm sorry. Yeah, stolen bases, 330 career stolen bases. So he wasn't obscene with his stolen bases, but when you saw Willie play, defensively he had no peer. His speed was phenomenal. Obviously his batting average as well as his power was phenomenal. So the man did everything great. His ability to field his position, clearly. He was without a doubt, Willie Mays is without a doubt, I believe, the single best all-around player that ever lived. In other words, a position player who did everything, great. Everything great. Willie Mays is probably that person. But I still put him at number 3 on my list. So let's take a look and see who number 4 is, shall we? So in my pantheon of players, in my Mount Rushmore, so to speak, of players, although Mount Rushmore has 4, I'm going at number 2, Hank Aaron. Now again, the All-Century Sporting News set had him at number 5. Hank, of course, is most notably known for his 755th home run. What made Hank Aaron so great? Let's take a look at his stats and talk a little bit about Hank Aaron. So Hank Aaron's stats are pretty amazing as well. What makes Hank Aaron, in my mind, number 2 all time is what I call consistency. The man was a dang machine of excellence in baseball. No one year was overly outstanding, although they were all dang good. I mean, he averaged like 30 home runs a year his entire career. For the longest time, I think the lowest number in there was 24 in the height of his glory years. He almost always hit 80 RBIs or more throughout his career. He was always in hits, 180 hits, 200 hits. Every once in a while there was a down year, but he was always right there. He almost always averaged around 300, finished with a 305 career batting average. He still today leads the majors in RBIs, 2,297 career RBIs. Certainly, you know, he's at the top of the home run list. So he was, well, I should at the top of the home run list. He is now, what do we have him at? Number 2 behind Barry Bonds, obviously. Career RBIs, he's number 1. Interesting that Albert Pujols is really close. But, and when you're talking about Hank's defense, Hank reminds me a little bit of Joe DiMaggio. People used to love talking about stories about how Willie Mays would dive for balls or make spectacular catches, or this or that player made a spectacular catch, and Joe DiMaggio always seemed to be lollygagging or, you know, just striding, jogging in the outfield. Well, that's because Joe DiMaggio knew where to position himself for each hitter and didn't have to run to catch the ball. Hank Aaron was the same way. He was a smart fielder. He didn't dive and get his uniform dirty all the time, but he was a good fielder. He had a great arm. And they always say when he was hitting, he had those quick wrists, which gave him all his power. He was a phenomenal hitter. Career hits-wise, what was his career hit total? Let me go back to the career hits for a second. Hank Aaron is number 3 in career hits. Now, he didn't have a huge average. Again, he was only 305 career average. He finished with the most home runs. He still has the 3rd most hits ever, finished with the most RBIs. Hank Aaron falls behind Willie Mays because we're all enamored with Willie's speed and defensive prowess. I would argue that Hank's offensive ability overshadowed his defense. In other words, I think he won more games with his bat than he might have given up by poor defense, or not even, I won't say poor defense. Maybe Willie got a couple more outs in his career than Hank would have gotten because Willie got to more balls. But again, I think Hank won more games with his offense that he let go by not being there to catch a ball. I think without a doubt, Hank Aaron should be number 2 all time. So that leaves us with number 1. And if you're playing along, you could probably guess who my number 1 is, but let's take a look anyway. So number 1 for me, and I imagine for many people, is going to be Babe Ruth. These are 2 cards from the Babe Ruth collection, and I picked these 2 cards for a very specific reason. These cards are his career batting average and his career hitting average, and I'm going to flip the phone around and let you see that along with some other stats, so give me a second here. So how can I say that Babe Ruth is the number 1? A lot of people are going to suggest that, oh, well, you know, so many other people are better than Babe Ruth for this reason or that reason. Let's talk a little bit about Babe Ruth for a second. People know about Babe Ruth and his home runs. The heck with home runs. Let's talk a lot of other things, shall we? All right. We were just looking a second ago at career RBIs. All right. First of all, Babe Ruth obviously finished with his career with the most home runs. He's still third all time with career home runs. He is 3rd now, career all time in RBIs. People never talk about Babe Ruth as a hitter. You got to ask yourself, you know, why that? Why don't they talk to him about a hitter? Now, he did not finish with 3,000 career hits. He finished with 2,800, but remember, he didn't have a lot of games early in his career because he was a pitcher. But what do you see him in? Here's Babe Ruth, number 13 in career batting average. People forget, for his entire career, Babe Ruth hit at a 340 career batting average. He would have finished 10th all time. Again, nothing against the Negro players who are on this list now, but prior to MLB adding them, Babe Ruth would have been listed as number 10. He is now number 13. That's still phenomenal. So his batting prowess is without, you know, all taken across the board, everything considered. You know, more home runs than any player prior to him. Hank Aaron bested him. You want to say Babe Ruth might have, if he had played a couple more years full time, it's likely he would have beat Hank Aaron. I don't care to speak about that. But Hank Aaron finished with a 305 career batting average. Babe Ruth finished at 342. Hank Aaron owned him in RBIs, but Babe is right there. Hank Aaron, had him in maybe in a couple other stats, but career slugging, I think Babe was still number one. Babe was an offensive prowess, and what makes him the best player of all time is that he was a phenomenal pitcher. You talk a little bit about that sometimes, and people say, oh yeah, for a couple of years there, he was a great pitcher. Take a look at these stats on the back of his card, and notice one thing. He joined the Yankees in 1920, okay? And they used him almost exclusively as an outfielder. But if you look at the card, you will see that in his career in New York, he actually pitched in a total of 5 games. In those 5 games, he won every single one of them. He never lost a game as a pitcher for the Yankees. It was only 5, but he never lost. Take a look at his career ERA. It's 2.28. His career ERA at 2.28. Take a look at the all-time list of pitchers with the lowest career ERA. Babe Ruth is still in the top 20. He's number 17. The only modern player to crack the top 20 is Mariano Rivera at number 13. Babe Ruth was a phenomenal pitcher. And if you take into consideration how awesome pitcher he was, and the fact that he was equally awesome, one of the best hitters ever, and you put those two together, he was a great fielder because think about this, they put him in right field. Right field is for those players with like strong arms. Being a pitcher, Babe Ruth had a strong arm. He didn't steal a lot of bases. He was famously thrown out to end the 1926 World Series trying to steal. All around, for both pitching and offensive, production. And also, a little bit comes to his overwhelming personality. I'm going to say Babe Ruth is without a doubt the greatest player to ever play this game. So there you have it. Those are my top 5 baseball players of all time. Number 5, Tris Speaker. Number 4, Ted Williams. Number 3, Willie Mays. Number 2, Hank Aaron. But number 1, Babe Ruth. So hope you all appreciate that. This shout out to Huck. This is my entry video for your contest, sir. I'll do all I've done all I need to make sure you're aware of it. So hope you enjoyed it as well. I appreciate you all stopping by to watch this little off-day video for me. Thanks for watching. Let's see if I win. Take care.